Despite the cuteness of this little guy, here's 5 reasons why you might want to consider not going to conventions. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And when you're watching this, I'm either about to be, or soon to be, or currently am at WSBG, the World Series of Board Gaming, which is a convention I've been talking about for a while. They've announced it for a while. It's basically a grand tournament thing where you can win $25,000 worth. That's not true. You can win $40,000 worth of prizes. $25,000 is just the first place prize, and there's other prizes and stuff and things, and it's all a competition to see who's the best at board games. And it's also a board game convention at the same time. There'll be booths, there'll be tables, there'll be various vendors there, and of course there'll be a contest to see who is the best board gamer, who wins $25,000 and who else wins $5,000 along the way. This guy's going to distract me. I just came back from Gen Con, where I got this little guy. I just came back from Gen Con, and I've recently really been enjoying conventions. But I also say that with the caveat that I've been in this hobby for 10 plus years. 11 years. I've been in the hobby for 11 years. That is 10 plus. I've been in this hobby for 11 years now, and up until becoming a content creator, I never went to conventions. I never bothered. I never found them worthwhile to me, and I don't think my opinion of that time frame has changed. I think conventions are excellent for many people. I think there are a lot of people for whom conventions can be a lot of fun, and they will continue to spend money to go to them again and again and again, and they will continue to do so and enjoy their decisions, which is something that I'm currently doing and am in that same bucket. But also I'm a content creator, so my situation has changed. The reason and the incentive for me to go has changed, and I think that as much fun as they are, as much fun as they can be, and as much as there can be reasons to go and reasons why you may go and continue going again and again and again, my favorite reason personally is convention buddies. The idea that as you continue to go, you build up this little clique of people you see at each convention, and you end up building a little network of friends that you see time and time again, and each time you add new faces to that network, and it really ends up being intensely rewarding in its own personal social sense. And I'm really not doing a good job with the point of this video. That's not the point. There are reasons to go. There are many reasons to go to conventions. But there are also 5 reasons not to go. And the point of this video is more about the fact that I think conventions are expensive, and I think you should be mindful of the reasons not to go and whether those conventions will or won't suit your needs. And if you're someone who's not going, I think there are very good reasons not to go. As much as I enjoy them right now, I have zero regrets about the time I spent the first 10 years not going to conventions. I don't look back at it and think, wow, I wish I had gone. I look back at it and think, no, it made sense. It was the right decision for me in the right time, given my own personal set of priorities. As nice as those friendships are, conventions are expensive, which brings me to reason number 1. The cost alone. The cost of going to any convention varies drastically depending on what your situation is, where the convention is, whether you have to fly or drive, or whether you don't have to go at all because it's really in your backyard. The cost of tickets of that convention, any number of factors can add to the cost in an intense amount of different ways. You could be talking about hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to go to a convention. I know people who flew in from Australia to Gen Con paying $2,000 a ticket before you even count other factors, which I can't even imagine. Well, I can imagine. It's just math and numbers, I guess. But the cost alone can be intense, and I would say on the low end, you're usually looking at several hundred dollars to go. On the low end, you're usually looking at, if you're looking at like a 4-day or 3-day vacation full over the weekend, you're usually talking somewhere in the range of $100 per ticket. That's just you. I mean, if you're going with your spouse, if you're going with, your kids, if you're going with any other of these conversations, it changes the cost as well. But even just focusing on just you, that could be several $100s for just you. Getting a hotel room and Airbnb over the course of convention in a popular area, that could be several $100s. You're already up to like $300-400. That's before we talk about the cost of gas if you're driving there, or the cost of the flight if you're flying there. That's before we talk about the cost of food while you're there. If you drove there, the cost of parking overnight for 3-4 days. Every single factor in vacations, before we even conventions, not vacations. They're not vacations. They're fun. They're not vacations. The cost of the board games you buy, and you're like, well, I buy the board games anyway. True, but you're paying more for them at conventions. Almost always you are paying more. Sometimes you are paying more for something you can't otherwise get easily. Other times you're just paying more. Board games at conventions are not cheaper. They have to fly them in there, and they potentially have to fly them out. There are additional expenses to the publishers, and those expenses are manifested in the prices. You often are paying a bit more than if you were buying it online from your local, from your online local game store, or online game store, OGS, your FOGS, your friendly online game store. And so they're expensive. Again, I would estimate in the low end between several hundred to $1,000 per person who's going to a convention. That cost can be brought down a bit if you're sharing rooms with people. That price goes down. The cost of a ticket goes up, but if you're going with multiple people, the cost per person, not the cost entirely, the cost per person goes down. If you have 2, 3, 4 people sharing a hotel room, those things are possible in Airbnb, and there are opportunities to save money. Of course there are. But the cost alone to go to a convention is expensive. You know what you can do with the cost of going to several conventions during a year? You can buy a board game table instead. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying which one's better or worse, I'm just pointing out you can buy a board game table or go to 3 or 4 conventions in a year, and depending on who you are, depending on the table, the conventions, your situation, those prices are roughly equitable. Which would you rather, a board game table that will improve your gaming every single day for the next 5, 10, 15 years, or going to conventions 3 or 4 times during the year? Those are reasonable decision points you'll have to make. The costs of conventions is not insignificant. Now again, before we go to the next reasons, there are ways to lower those costs by choosing the right conventions. For instance, in my case, if I just go to Origins and nothing else, my cost to go to Origins is absolutely minimal. It's the cost of gas to drive there for 3 hours, to drive back, overnight parking at like $27 a night, combined with the cost of a ticket. My cost to go to Origins on the low end is $200, $300 on the low end. I can go there every single night, not even sleep there overnight. It's entirely possible. But that's on the low end. That's an ideal situation, an ideal thing. The cost alone to go to a convention is intense. Understand that you should really, really value the convention that you're going to. Reason number 2 is more about the nature of conventions. And again, as with any of these reasons, picking and choosing your conventions, picking and choosing your situations, those things can help with this, but conventions can absolutely be overwhelming. The smaller conventions less so, but even there, if you don't like people, if you don't like noise, there definitely is going to be a factor there. But the larger conventions, you're going to Origins, to PAX, to Gen Con, to Essen, to UKGE. You're talking about places that are absolutely packed with people, people that are wandering around. You're walking down a hallway and you have to slow down because it's just a mass of people. You will be at times neck to neck with people as you're wandering, neck to neck, shoulder to shoulder with people as you make your way into the convention hall. There will be times where you feel overwhelmed. There will be times where the noise is too much. If you go to, bars post-convention to hang out, there will be times where that just gets to you. If you don't like noise, if you don't like large groupings of people, if you don't like feeling like you're being shepherded down a hall and you have to be mindful of where you step lest you hit the wrong person, conventions absolutely have that problem. It is almost baked into the fabric of what they are. A singular space, a lot of reasons to be there, and a desire to sell as many tickets as you possibly can to welcome as many people into the space as you possibly can, resulting in a degree of just people being crammed shoulder to shoulder the entire convention. Conventions can absolutely be overwhelming. If that's not your thing, there's plenty of ways to be involved in the board game hobby and without being at a convention. Watching reviews, playing board games, buying board games, dreaming about board games, thinking about board games, reading board game rules, reading the Terraforming Mars novel. I don't recommend that, but that's a possibility if you really want. There's a lot of ways to be involved in the board game hobby that don't involve conventions. If you're overwhelmed by what a convention might be, then it might be a place that you don't want to spend hundreds of dollars to get to, or thousands. Reason number 3, they may not give you what you want. And this is a kind of a backwards conversation, because this conversation kind of this conversation depends on why do you go to a convention in the first place. Why is it that you go to a convention in the first place? What is it that you're looking for from a convention? Are you going to play games? Are you going to buy games, to see games, to relax, to be around games and gaming, to meet gaming people? What is the reason that you personally go to a convention? Because I think depending on that reason depends on why you should go to a convention. As a baseline, if you're going to play games, you absolutely can play games at a convention. It's not necessarily the easiest, but there are certainly ways to do so. Now, the question is, are you playing games at home? What games are you playing at a convention that you're valuing? What is it? Is it about the newest games? Is it about just the fact that you don't have a game group? There are many reasons to go to conventions to play games, and there are opportunities where playing games is worthwhile to you, but there are also times where playing games is harder. If I stay at home all day with my game group, I will play more games than if I go to a convention to play games all day with my game group. It's the practical reality of the space, the noise, the situation, the determining what to jump to in a large area as opposed to what to jump to by picking games off the shelf around me. If you don't have a game group, then a convention might solve that need. So why are you going to a convention? You have to establish that and then see if the convention is giving you that. It may be an opportunity to play games more or better. It may be an opportunity to play games worse or less. Those are both possible. Buying games. Maybe you go to a convention to buy games. Well, why are you buying games? You can buy games anywhere. Are you getting them cheaper? You're probably not getting them cheaper. But what about getting the newest games? Do you really want the newest games? Well, then yes, a convention can help with that, but you also might have to spend 2 hours standing in line to get the latest copy of Twilight Inscription or whatever else the current hotness is. Those are definitely factors. What about the fact that some games are not available, or promos or versions of games are not available except at conventions? So yes, it may be solving your needs, but it may not be. You have to decide what aspect of buying games are you going to a convention for, and is it helping you? If you're going to see the newest stuff, well, that definitely is a good opportunity to go to conventions. Yes, a convention will give you the opportunity to see a lot of the newest stuff. If that's your compelling reason, by all means, I would encourage it. But again, factor in the cost, the benefits, what do you care about? And maybe you don't need to see them in person. Maybe just going to Board Game Geek and checking out the latest list of the Essen titles coming up. Maybe that's enough for you. Maybe it isn't. Seeing the games is often a conversation as well, but there's many ways to see the games. Subscribe to your favorite YouTuber and watch them run around the convention panicked as they try to make it out before the next situation happens or whatever, before the hall closes. There's many ways to see what's going on at Gen Con, and they don't all involve being there. They don't all involve having to pay to get to deal with all the stuff to be there. So it depends on what your reasons are. If your goal is to relax, well, I personally don't find conventions relaxing at all. I find them enjoyable, absolutely. I love conventions. Every convention I've gone to has been intensely enjoyable, and not a single one of them has been remotely close to relaxing. They've all been hustle and bustle and running around and trying to find the next thing and do that next thing and figure out your plans here, your costs here, your expenses there. They are far from relaxing. If your goal is to be around games and gaming, well then yes, I think they do solve for that very nicely. There's nothing that feels quite as involved as being involved in the hobby as being at a convention. So if that's your goal, I have nothing comparable to offer you at home. You can go to a game store, but it's not comparable. There is something magical and special about being around 15, 25, 30, 50, 100,000 people who are involved with the hobby. There's something magical about that, and there is something that is very cool and very interesting, and I would recommend going to a convention at some point in your life. It doesn't have to be now, but I think it is an experience that's worthwhile, but not necessarily on a general ongoing basis. So reason number 3 is kind of vague. It comes down to deciding why you want to go in the first place, and then seeing if a convention even solves for that reason. Reason number 4 is that you might get sick. And not just COVID, although also COVID is a possibility. The practical reality of being shoulder to shoulder with so many people for such a long period of time means that you are exchanging germs far more often and frequently than you would if you were home. You also tend to be pushing your body. A lot of the downsides, or a lot of the, well, not to say downside, the practical reality of going to convention is that you spend all that money and you're cramming all this short time frame, so there is that incentive to be up till 3 in the morning and then to get up at 6 the next morning to figure out what you need to do, and pushing your body and not enough sleep and potentially more alcohol, more partying, more running around and just walking for 4 days straight as you go through every single thing. You are pushing your body while being exposed to more germs. It's not a recipe for, well, health. There's a reason the term con crud exists. Con crud, the idea that you're getting a form of sickness, of crud, of just being unwell after a convention. And again, COVID's a part of that, but it's not the only part. It's just the nature. Pushing yourself at a convention does have a downside. Pushing yourself for 4 days straight around a lot of people means you might get sick. You might be paying hundreds of dollars and setting yourself up to be sick and unwell for the next 2 weeks, which isn't really fun for anyone. It's doable, but it's not necessarily fun. And so reason number 4 is just your general health and how much you care about that and whether it will or won't be affected by a convention. Reason number 5 is the lamest reason, but also true, is there's always going to be more conventions. You don't need to go today. You don't need to go tomorrow. You don't need to go next year. There will always be another Origins. There will always be another Essen. There will always be another UKGE, another Gen Con, another PAX Unplugged, another Dice Tower West, another Board Game Geek Convention, BGG Con. There'll always be another cruise. There'll always be another everything in terms of these conversations. These aren't things you need to push yourself to do today for fear of missing out. They will exist tomorrow. They will be there tomorrow. If you're watching those pictures show up on your Facebook feed of the people going to conventions, understand how much they paid and what they put themselves through to go there, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying there's a trade-off there. It is not the sunshine and roses and happiness as somebody comes home with a haul of 20 games to show on the table and you're like, well, I want some of that. Well, they paid for some of that. There is a cost and an exchange to all the stuff that you're seeing without the cost and the exchange present. And so maybe that's worthwhile to you. Maybe you already go to them. Or maybe you don't need to and you haven't yet and there's not a strong rush. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I've been in the hobby for 11 years and only in the past year have I started going to conventions. And I don't regret the time I didn't. I don't regret the time that I didn't. That's a better way of phrasing it. I don't regret the time that I didn't go. I don't look back and think, but what if I had gone? What if this? I actually look back and think, well, I could have been out several $100s per convention for the past 10 years, which adds up to a hefty amount of money, and maybe it's a good thing that I waited this long. Maybe it's a good thing that I only started today. I don't look back. There's many things I look back and regret. There's many situations where I look back and think, I wish I had done that earlier. I love going to conventions, make no mistake. But also understand and realize that I have the additional incentive of being a content creator, which means there's an additional business aspect and business incentive in place. And even with all of that, I don't regret the time I didn't spend going. I do think it's an experience you will want to add to yourself. I think it's an experience that if you are in this hobby, if you love this hobby, if you like being around games, I think it's an experience that you will find enjoyable. That doesn't mean it's an experience you need to pursue today. I would say that start small. Find something local, find the closest and easiest and most affordable and most compelling one to yourself, and see if it gives you a taste of something you like. I had a friend who decided to come with me on a Sunday trip to Origins, a one-day trip to just get a feel for what it's like. And that led him to process and to sit there and think through how we want to handle getting things out of the next convention. I think that was a good way for him to explore. No overnight, no nothing. It cost him a $25 ticket and 6 hours in the car, and he got to see what the convention was all about. Find your opportunity to do that. To go in for a day, to lower your cost to the lowest threshold possible, and get a sense of the experience and what it's worth to you. Because I think they're very cool, and I think they're very fun. But I think if you find yourself going to all of them, it's going to be a very expensive lifestyle incredibly quickly. So just make sure that you're getting what you want out of the experience. Hope you found this video in some way helpful and useful. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.